We are recording. Next thing we'll do is introduce ourselves and then we'll get started. Helen, let's go ahead and start with you.
Hi, Dave. I'm Helen Robinson. I'm the managing editor for the Colorado Springs Business Journal. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And Alyssa?
Hey there, Alyssa Smith. I am associate editor for the Colorado Springs Indy, and it's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And I'm Brian Grossman, editor-in-chief of both the Business Journal and the Independent. This is a portion of the group that will be making endorsements. So you'll be chatting with us this afternoon. Again, thank you. Why don't we go ahead and get started? We don't have a ton of time. Why don't you start by telling us who you are and how you ended up right there where you're sitting?
David Noblitt, obviously, lived in Colorado Springs for 35 years, got here in 1985. Been a public servant for over 40 years. Married, I've got a beautiful family, kids, grandkids, which are the absolute best. Lived in District 2 for just short of 30 years. And looking at retiring, obviously, upon successful candidacy for election and or by July, either one. So it's kind of the year for stepping out of a long history of being involved in the fire service. So just truly want to be part of making an impact to a community that I think definitely needs some actual representation.
Okay. In more detail, why are you running for city council?
Well, the tenets of my campaign fundamentally are accountability, responsibility to the constituents, public safety, obviously, and then responsible growth. And in all of those things, I think they're so interconnected. And it's truly my core of what I actually believe. I've seen the frustration of constituents trying to convey messages or concerns to city council and those being disregarded. I think that a lot of the planning that we have for this city goes on within a select small group of people, and that they make decisions for the entire community. And I don't know, even though there's a lot of indication that there's involvement by the community, I really don't feel that the community has an impact in making and having a voice to actually make changes. And with that, I've actually seen some of the developments within District 2 bring issues forward to council and were summarily dismissed. And that's got to be frustrating. And to that, public safety, as we're watching the growth of a city go forward, public safety entails, I think, a lot more than just what people would think is police and fire. It's infrastructure, it's roadways, it's a traffic management system that actually manages traffic. It's the understanding of, as we develop and grow this city, exactly what it's going to do to our community and to the people that live here. I mean, the traffic, it's, and as the growth and the expanse goes into the north and to the east, those impacts are into our neighborhoods, and our neighborhoods are frustrated, and they want to see, some consideration given as we continue to sprawl. And then obviously that ties into the fact that there needs to be responsible growth, and that growth needs to be at a pace to make sure that supposedly these grand illicit plans that we've designed, in such as Plan COS, are actually being implemented. Because in reality, if you come to my neck of the woods, everything that we've done in the past 20 years looks like it's being repeated, because it seems like there's a great expanse of urban sprawl with not a lot of the concentration of the urban centers that we want to develop in our communities to make it, reasonable for our folks to kind of live and be, get outdoors and enjoy the great beauty that we have in this community. It just seems like we're doing the same thing over and over again. And I don't get that. So I think that somebody needs to actually get in there and make sure we represent the people, so that those concerns are addressed and we actually do the right by the citizens of this community.
What do you think you can do personally if you're elected to address responsible growth?
That's a great question. I was actually asked that earlier today, because it's like, well, how can only one person out of 9 do something? Well, hopefully there's going to be some new faces on council this time around, and hopefully, right, you start to build and develop relationships, which is something that I've been involved in a multiple of different facets. So being a conservative, but actually being in the a labor leader, within a firefighters association, are kind of like the two opposite ends of the spectrum. But it's because you can reach literally, this figurative speech of everybody always saying, hey, we're going to reach across the aisle. it's not, let's actually do that. Let's actually get together, sit down and have conversations and develop an understanding of, let's be factual about what we're actually seeing. Let's not just look at a grandiose plan and go, oh yeah, we've resolved all of our issues. If you go outside and really look at what's going on in the community and try to encourage the other counselors to see in the same way, that you're seeing, because honestly, unless I'm just insane, I believe that what I'm seeing is the reality and the facts of what's occurring. And so I think I've got kind of that truth on my side, and I don't want to sound, like overly, whoa, look, it's me, because I'm saying, come out and go to Research and Powers Boulevard and look east and tell me that you see anything that's being considered that would be applicable to the planned COS. And it's just not there. So hopefully with some new faces. And the fact is I've got to start someplace. I don't think I have the horsepower to run for mayor. And this is truly representative of the area that I live. This is my home. You know what I mean? So my kids live in my district. They just redrew the district lines. And it was so exciting because it was like my kid's house is literally in the new redrawn portion of my district. And some of the facets that they're looking at, right? So we got dual taxation. So we're annexing new properties, but we still haven't even defined exactly who it is that has the fire protection districts that are in there. And we're dual taxation on that. And it's taking years to resolve that. And supposedly it's resolved, but it's not actually resolved. So I know I get a little amped up about it, but honestly, there's things that are obviously within the realm and the purview of the responsibility of the counselor for District 2. And we need to at least start working on those issues that are specific to my district. And then let's broaden that out to the entire city and make sure we're doing right by everybody.
Aside from the growth issue, are there other things you see within the district that you think need attention?
Well, I mean, I know that they're going to address, and it's a double-edged sword. So I'm appreciative of the fact that one of the major thoroughfares that we're having huge congestion problems at is Research and Powers. Right. But because of the pandemic and the allocation of funds, and we actually pulled some funding off the CARES package or whatever. So we're looking at doing an overpass there, and then that'll positively impact that. Right. And a lot of that is because of our schools that are so attractive up in this area or whatever. So we've got a lot of surrounding people coming into one really defined area. So that's going to be addressed. Although I think that the thoroughfare on Research is going to be similar to what they're addressing, like that we have down on the Fillmore Bridge. Now, personally, I've been across the Fillmore Bridge and I've never been capable of actually making it from one end to the other without stopping, if not once, multiple times. So I'm hoping to really readdress and look at what that thoroughfare on Research is going to be. I think our traffic management system needs to be addressed throughout the city, because I believe that it's been the same way for a number of years. I have no idea why. As I drive around this city, it just hits me. The capture of the synchronization of the lights, which at times is no synchronization, but it's planned because it's repetitive every time. And I don't think that it's efficient. And I think that, I know that the Briargate Improvement District, we've got some serious issues as far as funding that are going on in that. And I don't think the residents here have any understanding of that. And, you come up Research Parkway and it's beautiful. It's an oversized boulevard, but it's beautiful. But if we don't take care of that, then that's going to fall into disrepair, and then we're going to end up chasing, that tail of trying to catch up with the additional funding because we didn't take care of it now. So that improvement district is critically important for me to make sure traffic management improves not only in my area of the city, but in the city throughout. Mm-hmm. And then definitely the infrastructure that needs to be addressed is a huge concern, in addition to the housing issues.
What you mentioned the city as a whole, what other issues do you think the city is facing that you can assist with? Not just your district, but the city as a whole.
To be realistic, my frustration, and this is kind of as being part of the Firefighter Association and intimately working with the city administration in the past, I had a lot of consternation with the mayor concerning the funding of 2C and the temporary nature of that. I mean, we literally have roadways that are in incredible disrepair. And I know that we're making incredible strides with 2C, but what happens when that runs out? We need a sustainable funding source for our infrastructure. And that's not just for infrastructure, but obviously for public safety. The fundamentals of government are truly not really solidly financed. And a lot of that is because we have a lot of these siloed districts that we've allowed all this kind of really explosive growth to happen and then supposedly pay for itself. So they get to impose their own property taxes. And so now we have all of this stuff everywhere that's so frustrating to try to narrow down. I don't know how we can kind of smooth all of those collective districts and maybe bring them together underneath one envelope, and then try to look at assessing an appropriate property tax that may go along with that. But we honestly are going to have to buckle down and look at something, because once the 2C sales tax goes away, the amount of money allocated for infrastructure, for road repair, our public safety sectors are definitely lagging as far as financing. We've got some huge issues with parks. You know what I mean? They're looking at another potential tax increase because of the necessity on that. So overall, we've got a really like this dichotomy of a thing of where this community is really exploding and growing and supposedly being so prosperous, but yet we've got some strained resources when it comes to the fundamentals of what we want to take care of in this community, which is that infrastructure, making sure that we take care of our parks. And obviously our housing situation is crazy right now as far as the affordability and the availability of it. So, I mean, there's some significant issues that we need to address in all of that.
Good segue to affordable housing. What would you do to address the affordable housing crisis in Colorado Springs if you're elected?
Well, right. Again, you know, we keep talking about we want to watch for that density thing. Well, I mean, if we take a whole bunch of 3,500 square foot houses and we put them really, really close together, does that now consider, you know what I mean? Are we improving our density? I don't think so, because the cost of those houses are still crazy. And I know there's a lot of conflict with like multifamily housing and apartments that are in traditional residential neighborhoods. Now, I've got a brand new apartment complex. It's kind of on the back side of my residential neighborhood, and for the life of me I can never remember what the name of it is. I don't mind that, but I think what the problem is they literally put in 300 additional units and dumped it out onto a single ingress egress lane of a 2-lane road that dumps into Briargate Parkway with no additional consideration for turn lanes or expanding that intersection to allow for the increase in traffic flow, right? So what we're doing is we're going in, we're stamping these things in the middle of people's backyards, but we're really not talking to them about it, and we're really not resolving issues such as, why do people have such an outcry because they have to stop and wait for through traffic to go because they can't turn right because they didn't accommodate in this, you know, this intersection for the additional traffic. So now they're frustrated and they're yelling at the apartment complex. Well, it's not really the apartment complex that's a problem. It's the fact that they honestly didn't take into consideration the impact for the traffic and account for that and allow for the developer to actually make considerations for that. So why aren't we having those conversations on the front side? Because I think we could resolve, honestly, a lot of these issues if we went in and said, hey, look, you know what I mean? This is what we need to do. And so, you know what I mean? To offset that anger, or I think that resentment to some of those areas where we want to change the modality of the housing. And I also think there's some terrific areas. And I don't know, I honestly don't know. But for me, like in between Galley and Constitution on the east side of Academy, right? We've got this incredible land use of all this old retail spot, right? That just basically is sitting empty and nobody really knows what to do with it. Let's develop some of those areas in those underserved areas that really kind of fallen out of, you know, their purpose. And let's take a look and see if, hey, what can we do as far as multifamily housing within those units? You know what I mean? It's got public assets for access, easy for me to say, for transportation, close to shopping, and a lot of other things that would really make it. And I don't know if that's realistic for that specific segment, but I think that there's a lot of areas in the city that we could really look at to try to do something to benefit those, you know, that need for more housing.
Okay. What measures would you take if you're elected to assist small businesses that have been impacted by the coronavirus?
Well, you know, it was kind of funny. I think what we really needed to do was to move earlier into the process of coordinating that with the county, because in all reality, and I don't know for sure if the county actually was able to finish spending their money, which really sounds funny because now, I mean, like I think some of that actually trickled into that research and powers interchange because of the fact that they were allocated such a large segment of that money. They were generous enough to give some of that to the city, but I think we really could have gotten together and benefited with $100 million combined, both offsetting the impacts for the employees that were affected, that were essential employees, which was a good thing, because then that way those employee costs weren't impacted to budgets that did see a downturn on that. But I think we should have coordinated that effort and to help use that CARES funding more specifically for those local businesses. And by the way, I think that our autonomy as a home rule city should have allowed us a little bit more latitude as far as how much and how affected those businesses were from some of the statewide mandates, where I don't think that's, that one size fits all type thing. I think we could have had a little bit more latitude in making some decisions that would have benefited our small businesses, to make sure that that impact wasn't as significant as it was, just because we're seeing an explosive growth happening in Denver or Boulder or even Grand Junction. That those limitations should not have to transition to El Paso County if it's not necessary.
Okay. Both city council and city government have received criticism in the past about not being the most diverse. What are your thoughts about diversity, both in city government and on council, and how can we facilitate a more diverse representation?
Well, I find it funny. So I was in the executive board of the Firefighters Association for 12 years, the last 4 years as a sitting president. In the stipend that I received from that, the city stipend is half of that. Which is funny, from running a labor organization representing approximately 400 people to running a city and a district that's got 80,000 people in it. And you're not going to ever be able to get anybody that's going to be able to come into council to represent them, given the financial or the economic circumstances that we find ourselves in. You can't give somebody a $6,200 stipend for a year and then expect to have a broad spectrum of people that are going to be available to even pursue that, honestly. And I don't think that we need to pay, at the Denver level, but our county commissioners make over $100,000. So why wouldn't city council, And I'm one of those, I'm not proposing this for myself, And that's always the scare thing. Well, if we say this, it's going to sound selfish. Well, the national mandate right now is looking at $15 an hour. They say that on average it's 30 to 40 hours a week for city councilors to do their jobs. So let's start at the basis with that and start them at $20,000 or $25,000 a year. That would broaden some of that up. The other diversity problem, I think, and I see throughout the workforce, some of my suggestions as far as actually getting into schools earlier on into the process, especially in the technical schools and the technical skills. And I know that police and fire have tried to do this as well, right? So get in and apply like police cadet programs, fire explorer programs, where we're getting into the schools and allowing these kids to take a look at the opportunities that they have to work in and for the community. And so that we try to transition them right while they're still young and impressionable, right? And get them aware of the opportunities that they have in that. Because in reality, we got to look at Colorado Springs as a fairly, small diversity pool to choose from. So we really need to look at those areas where we really need to have the best opportunity to recruit from. And in reality, that those are those young teenagers in high school and maybe early college age that have not yet quite made the decisions on what directions that they want to go. And let's try to influence them there and grow that up into a community, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but I definitely think that we can have an opportunity to start from scratch, because I know that both, at least on the public safety side, they're doing an incredibly great job at trying to get out and recruit and improve that diversity. But sometimes, again, it's just what's available. And, some people are already locked into their career. So let's get them at the beginning before they make that decision to go in a direction and head them this way.
What are your thoughts on legalizing recreational marijuana within the city, dispensaries?
It's funny. I was supposed to have a meeting with the CSCA yesterday afternoon at 4:00 and lost the communication and a bail on that. So personally, from a public safety perspective, right, I'm not a fan of recreational marijuana, but my honest beginning of what the 3 tenets of my campaign are, and what I feel that we don't have right now, is actual representation of the constituents, right? I'm not there to represent David. I'm there to represent the people that I represent. I think the Northeast side, my district would probably be, I would say conservatively, that they probably would be in opposition to that. But to the point of the community as a whole, right? Because we can't say, well, each council person that represents a district is just responsible for that district. So sorry, the 3 districts that are at large, or the 3 council person at large, get to make the decisions for anybody else. So that being said, I think that it's good to have the consideration to allow this to go to a vote of the people. My problem with it is, and I've been on both sides of this fence, right? So in a representative republic, we should have the ability to petition our government for the grievances that we have, right? That's the foundational ability of living in a free society, to petition our government for our grievances. The petition process in Colorado Springs, and I don't know if it's a remnant of Doug Bruce, I'm not sure what it is. It's so prohibitive as far as cost wise that it's really difficult. And we've gone through that process. So we've truly experienced what that is. So is it reasonable to have an expectation for people to actually do that to get their issue before the constituents?
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other side of that, we've got a multi-million-dollar industry that obviously could afford to do that. And from my perspective, I got to look at it in, if they brought that to themselves and they petitioned it onto the ballot, they would be able to define the language
right.
of that ballot. If we brought it from the council side of it, I am afraid that it would end up being so restrictive and be so negative that it's almost not worth, because let's be honest about it. I mean, there's some incredible forces within this city that are definitely in opposition to it. And we've seen what happens personally when those forces kind of gang up on are opposed to something. So if council actually drew that up as what they're requesting, I'm thinking that language would be so restrictive and that initiative would be so narrow that they wouldn't be happy with it at all. So all that being said, I truly believe that it's an issue that's not going to go away. So why don't we just get with it? But I know the one thing that I do and have shared concern with already in some of the correspondence that I've had with those folks is that there is kind of a tedious spot that we're in right now, because there is this consideration of Space Command. And let's not do anything to rock the boat, regardless of however you want to look at this. You know what I mean? Maybe now at this point in time, until we get a clear identification or clear understanding of what that outcome is going to be, you know what I mean? Let's sit around for a while and play that out, because I guarantee that you raise your voice at this moment in time, as sensitive as that issue is, and they're going to get absolutely destroyed. And anybody else along who kind of attaches themselves with it. So it's just, you know what I mean? Can you understand that perspective? I think that's a realistic understanding of what's going on. Once we get through that, I think there may be the fact that it's like, hey, if we don't retain Space Force, we may need to make up for the revenue somehow. So maybe that's the time to look forward to being the best time for that to come out. But let's give that a see as it goes to find out what we do with Space Force first.
Okay. You talked about having sort of different perspectives, being conservative, but also leading a union, I think is how you phrased it. How do you collaborate with those who maybe see things differently from you? And how would you see that working if you were elected to city council?
Well, it's funny. I had a really long conversation with Richard Scorman yesterday. And because of, again, my interactions with council and city administrators, we've established a relationship, and we laughed about the things that we would disagree about. And we found common ground on quite a few issues. And I think the really awesome part is that we could have differences and we can have disagreements, and we're still friends at the end of the day. And I think, if I had all the answers in the world, you know what I mean, then I would definitely beat my pound my chest and pound the table and say everybody needs to listen to me. But I'm finding out even now, right, that I'm growing and experiencing new things and perspectives from different people that you have to stop and say, yeah, why? I mean, like I said, the medical marijuana thing or the recreational marijuana thing, there's so many facets at looking at that, you know what I mean? And so what weighs the most important? And ultimately what it really comes down to is what is in the best interest of the community that we serve? Because honestly, that's the reason why we're there, you know what I mean? And so if I don't get my way, that's one thing. If the turn of what I'm supposed to do to represent my constituents, if I make that voice and I stand on their behalf and represent their wants, then I feel that I've done my job. Now there's times, you know what I mean, right? So democracy is pure democracy is three wolves and a lamb trying to decide what they're having for dinner, right? We have a representative republic in which we're supposed to take the voice of our constituents. And sometimes those voices can actually be out of line. And then that's when you have to apply the common sense and find out what is good for the common whole of the community. But I still think that for the most part, hi buddy, listening to the constituents and representing them is the most important thing right up until that point in time when you know that it's actually not good, because there's just such an outcry, maybe not based on all the information, because sometimes it's hard to inform a large group of people of the small detail facts of really what's going on. Oh, crap's in it. Go on.
Which dog's name?
Milo. Hi, buddy.
Milo.
You say hi? Hey, come here. Oh, yeah. Hi. This is like the boiled rotten German Shepherd you've ever met. No, I'm not feeding you. No.
Maybe German Shepherd, but I think Alyssa's cat might have you on overall. We'll see. So what makes you most qualified for this seat?
I think the fact that I've been actively involved for the last 12 years with the executive board and having relationships with like the city HR, having an understanding and working with them on a wide variety of things, from pensions to compensation, to understanding benefit packages, to working with the executive branch and understanding the pressures that are on there, to listening to Charest and Terry and being involved with those folks of, you know, what we think we see in the budget until they actually kind of unfold everything else, because it is a very complicated lane as far as whatever. It's just not just the general fund. And then having that interaction with city council, and then also understanding politics to some extent. You know, I've been around this community and I've loved this community. And for whatever reason, like I said, I don't know why it is that I notice the repetitive timing of traffic lights within our city. I notice who's doing what as far as road work. It's just something that's always been kind of that point that I really get frustrated when people's voices aren't heard. And I've always kind of been one of those like defender of the little person type thing. And I'm just there to try to make sure that people have a voice that's actually heard and that we do right by our people. And that's just a passion in my heart. So, you know, I don't know it all. There's still a lot of things that I'm going to have to learn. Utility side of it is like craze, right? But the cool part about CSU is that they do a really awesome job. You know what I mean? They really do. I really feel that they're true to their motto as far as actually taking care of the community. So, you know, that governance is going to be a big responsibility and a big learning curve, but I'm passionate about it. And if nothing else, I'm honestly not there for any agenda, but besides to represent the people that send me there to do the job.
Yep. 2020 was a rough year for law enforcement nationally, not just, you know, in Colorado. In fact, we probably got by better than a lot of communities. You are not a police officer, but you are in public service. What's your impression about law enforcement in the city, and how can, it may not be as big of an issue in your district, but citywide, how can relationships be improved between law enforcement and those they are charged with protecting?
So being from a person who's actually been on the streets, what I'm seeing is some of the frustration that happens when you have too few people trying to do too much work. And in reality, we know that, and the mayor's been really good about this, right? And trying to include 125, I think, additional law enforcement officers. But right now with their kind of with the retirements and their turnover, you know what I mean? They're having a hard time just trying to fill classes to try to keep at the status quo, let alone kind of get ahead. So in reality, you know, we all have heard the voices and truly understand some of the resolutions that would be really awesome, you know what I mean, for community policing engagement, more interaction. And if you get to know people and again, develop relationships, which is really weird, right? You actually get to know people, things get better on both sides. You get to understand each other's perspectives. But all of that stems from the fact that if you're already doing 10 hours of work in an 8-hour shift or 12 hours of work in a 10-hour shift, you know what I mean? For you to then go ahead and fit in all of those additional responsibilities, your frustration level just starts going through the roof. And so you can see where that kind of all ends up snowballing. And then there's this angst. And so personally, I think we need, again, this kind of falls back to my original push, is we need to have and develop a sustainable funding source that positively takes care of the fundamental responsibilities of our government, so that we ease the burden on those police officers so that we have enough people to get out into the community and to actually hear the voices that are going on and the concerns that are being presented, and engage with those people and interact with those people. And let's look at, I mean, and honestly, Mayor Suthers, when he was in the district attorney's office, started to develop a restorative justice for the youth offenders. And I mean, that's amazing stuff. It's incredible work, but we got to have the resources to be able to do it. And we can't simply just add it onto somebody's plate that already has a full plate. So again, I mean, just like with the education system, right? The funding is really necessary to make sure it's adequate and they have the necessary tools to do their jobs, because it's important to make sure that our kids are taken care of. It's important that our communities are taken care of, but we have to have the resources to make that happen. And so sometimes I think we got to get off of kind of our chintzy little butts, in all honesty. And I'm not saying, hey, we need to have huge revenue generators. And I know that our city, as a fiscal conservative, I know our city works really efficiently. Sometimes I think too much, to the point where some of our people are just overtaxed. So I believe we need to start there.
Okay. Can you talk about a mistake you've made and what you've learned from it?
Oh, today? Or I mean,
pretty open-ended, yeah.
I mean, like, 100,000, whatever. You know what? It's funny. When I was a brand new lieutenant and I went to Station 7, and it was an incredible experience. It's one of the busier houses in town. I'd actually been stationed there earlier on the rescue program. It's kind of goofy. It's a fire station in the middle of the road, right? It runs all over into some of the other districts or whatever. And we got called down to a fire in 11's district, and it was a fairly confined roadway structure inside of kind of a townhouse complex, and it really wasn't adequately defined as far as what I was seeing on my little AVL or my GTAC in front of me, of saying where the fire was at, and what the physical evidence was kind of saying. And I was a brand new lieutenant, and my driver, I was like a choice of two different roads, and the gut feeling was to go left. The technology told me I should go right, and I should have known better and gone with both my driver and my gut feeling, right? And did what I knew in my soul and my gut was right, and head that direction. We didn't. I said, let's go to the right and follow the technology. And we literally dumped a hose bed full of hose onto the ground to no place. And from then on, and I mean, it was very young in my officership or whatever. And I said, I promised myself at that point in time that I would never again, look at technology. I would always trust my gut, because I mean, after doing it for as many years as I have, those things are necessarily right. And especially when you had a confirmation with a trusted partner as they sit across the doghouse from you, to go, boss, I think it's this way. And I'm just like, I'm looking at this nervously going, yeah, I'm going to trust in technology. In reality, sometimes what you see may not necessarily be accurate. You got to really go with what your gut and your heart tell you. And in the 5 years since that point in time, I think that's definitely served me well.
Bird's eye view, how would that influence how you govern?
Same thing, right? I mean, I think that there's some things that we think that we're set on. I know that there's a lot of times when I felt that there were aha moments that I caught the city in doing something that I thought was not, in the best interest. And then when you dig down into it, you get that information, and sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. But I think for the most part, that you have to trust your intuition and you have to trust your gut. And sometimes, what people may say to you or what you see with your eyes may not necessarily be the depth of it. And if nothing else, it's an indication for me that I need to look deeper. I need to hear from the other people on the other side. I need to find out what both sides of the story are. I know that working, in the first vice president position that I did for 4 years, which was in charge of discipline, right? Every time somebody gets jammed up, everybody's innocent and the other person's always wrong, right? Yeah. So trying to find, there's his story, their story, then there's somewhere in the middle, there's the truth. So, don't just trust initially on the information that's being presented to you. Go with your gut feeling and try to find out what's really going on behind the scenes, and let's get to a good answer before you make a decision.
Okay. What is one of your proudest achievements?
Dude, you can't ask an old guy like that, dude. I'm gonna whatever.
I meant today. No.
Today? Yeah, right. Right. You know what I mean? In all honesty, I look at my daughter who literally just completed her master's degree. You know, and there was just so much stuff that went on in her life, right? So, and we only had one child, and I think maybe it's because the good Lord knew we could only handle one. But I mean, she's amazing. She's gone into counseling because of some of the things that happened to her in her childhood, because she wants to turn around and help other people, right? And that heart and that compassion for taking care of other people is something that we stuck with through raising our daughter, and that it came through, right? And now I see it in my grandson. A legacy of caring, compassion, desire to help other people. And that's what her career is. I mean, she literally just went through raising a family, going to school, finishing off her master's degree in this, because of the fact that she wanted to make a positive impact into other people's lives. She wanted to serve others. I don't like to boast or be proud, but
Yeah, that's a good one.
pretty, sorry.
No, that's fine. How about I ask this last one because it's fun, and then we'll go to the other.
Okay.
And then we'll go to the others and see if they have questions. Aside from hanging out with Milo, what do you do for fun?
Honestly, I love to ride motorcycles. I'm actually in a motorcycle ministry. It's kind of a crazy outreach. My wife and I were just talking about it. I just got done with an elbow surgery, so I haven't been having too much fun as of late, but I won't say she made me, I got rid of my sport bikes because purportedly I was going too fast on them. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, because I would never infringe upon the violation of a speeding law by all means. But yeah, I do love motorcycling, any kind of road bikes. So sport bikes, got a couple Harleys in the garage, you know, goofing off with my family, you know, chasing the dog around. I used to love to ski, but it's kind of gotten expensive and I can't seem to find the time anymore. You know what I mean? Which is really sad, because I mean, I wouldn't even take the skis that I used to own up on the hill, because I think people would look at them and go, yeah, I saw a pair of those hanging over the fireplace someplace. Aren't those like whatever? So yeah, but so for the most part, it's motorcycling and then just kind of enjoying the outdoors. We love to get out, and that knucklehead German Shepherd just runs us to death, and enjoying what Colorado Springs has to offer, which is the amazing ability to get outdoors and enjoy the nature that we have around us.
Okay. Let's see if others have questions. Alyssa, you got anything?
Yes, you've mentioned that the constituents of your district in particular feel as though they haven't really been listened to. Are there particular issues that you see have been ignored by council, and how would you make sure that you're reaching out to these people so that you do listen?
Well, there's two of them, and it's funny, you know, I mean, you would think that running for city council, I would have like the location. So I know Cumbra Vista is one of them. So that was one of the most recent annexation where we have a growth of housing, and a conflict of fire protection districts, where Black Forest Fire is still taxing those folks that are in there, and the city obviously is providing, services as well, and is supposed to be the primary, it should be the only actual fire protection district that's involved in that. So they're basically being dual taxed. Andy Pico, which is part of District 5, so it used to be his district, now my district, was supposed to have resolved that issue. Well, obviously it's in my lane, so I know a lot of the players on both sides. Black Forest Fire Chief and administrators, obviously our administration, they tentatively got that fixed, but they really didn't. So effectively, out of 1,100 and some odd homes, 177 out of filings are going to basically be pulled off that for this year. And there was an expectation out there that that would be resolved, and it's still not resolved. And as a matter of fact, our city legal is still struggling in exactly what the parameters of that were set. And two fire chiefs are trying to come to a conclusion of actually how to work that out. There's a real frustration right there, because what we've done is we just annexed another 900 acres east of that property, and we did the same thing. The city got smart and actually said that it'll now be incumbent upon the residents for them to collectively get together and file and petition to the Falcon Fire Protection District to try to get out from underneath the burden of what those taxes are, so that they can now be protected by the city. That's not the right way to do business. If we're going to annex property, why wouldn't that be resolved before we make sure that we say it's going to be part of our city? You know what I mean? Who's responsible for that? And by all means, we don't need to have that dual taxation thing. Let's resolve those issues And we had one up for the Northgate for up at Voyager, right? So for like 10 or 11 years, all those folks up in Northgate and all along that paid dual taxation. So we haven't learned, right? So here we go again. Like I said, some of the plans that are on the books for kind of the metropolitan districts that we want to put together, I'm like, man, that's great. But come up to my district and look out my window and I'm not seeing it. So I don't know how it's applied. So, and again, we had another district that's up off of Old Ranch, and this is the one that I always forget the name of. It's something Gulch, but they did the same thing. They're basically building an additional neighborhood on top of their neighborhood. An ordinance says that they're supposed to have 2 means of ingress, egress, and it's either going across the Gulch, which means building a huge bridge, which obviously is expensive, or coming back out on the county land to get a secondary road. And the county didn't necessarily want to play. City said, well, we're going to go ahead and allow those folks to now basically drive through the existing neighborhood to get out of town, right? To get out of the neighborhood, which is obviously going to put a tremendous strain on those existing neighborhood streets that weren't meant for thoroughfares. They were meant for regular neighborhood streets, right? You don't want your kids out playing in the street when somebody else is using that as a major thoroughfare. So both of those cases are ones that are actually in the district. And then there's one that's actually a county enclave that just had a really negative thing kind of happen, where somebody came in, bought a piece of property, redeveloped into a commercial property, and then requested that the city annex it into. So now the remaining enclave of the county folks are really threatened by the fact that they've now got this, reclassified piece of property right next to theirs. And it's been changed to a city property. And you can see where the next door neighbor is not going to want to live next to that, right? So then they're going to sell their property. So then somebody else is going to buy that up. And then pretty soon you end up losing the original intent of that county enclave of, 5-acre lots or 2.5-acre lots where people really wanted to have that distance and have been there for a long time. Those are things that the city's just kind of plowing over the top of because they think that they know it's in their best interest. And they're not going in and working with the existing neighbors. Nobody was really aware of this business coming in or was really aware of kind of the changes that were anticipated as far as the city annexing that property in. And again, if we have conversations on the front side, resolve the issues before you make decisions. And then that way you don't have people that are like, just want to, are super frustrated and angry and lashing out. So why not listen to them? Resolve the issues and try to find answers to the problems before you just go make decisions, or before we just go grab up a whole bunch of property. And then everybody the next year opens up their property tax bill and says, well, what are all these taxes for? I live in the city of Colorado Springs. Why do I have Black Forest Fire Protection District or Falcon Fire Protection? You know what I mean? Why are we doing that to people? So those are things that are directly within my district that have created that frustration level, that it's just like, we've got to do business better. You know what I mean? If we're really trying to plan out a community, let's just quit saying that we're doing it. Let's actually do it.
Alyssa, did you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Ellen, any questions?
Yeah, this sort of follows on from, the tail end of what you were just talking about. You've expressed concern over lack of transparency in terms of decision-making, subsidies, funding. Have you been able to bring transparencies to similar processes before? And how would you work to make that happen on City Council?
Well, so for instance, from a labor organization, and people always think that, unions are always bad, but firefighter safety is always the number one and most critical, important issue. And then the ability for us to always serve our community, right? To provide those services to the community that there's an expectation for us to fulfill. And our apparatus replacement budget had really been lacking as in the last couple of years. And there was definitely a slow lag from the economic rebound that we've seen and kind of the refunding for that particular fund. And the necessity for us to actually get somewhat in front of that was important. And we kind of worked the magic through City Council, even though the executive branch wasn't too excited about expanding that budget. We really demonstrated that there was a need for, and the reasons why. And I mean, again, it comes down to those really sometimes obstinate things, which are called facts. And we were able to lay out a really defined plan that showed the facts that we were really deficient in a fire apparatus that was critical and for a section of town, both for the safety of our firefighters and for our ability to respond to the public. and adequately serve them, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to be on the 7th floor and then find something that couldn't reach you to save you. So we don't want to be in that spot, and you wouldn't want to be in that spot. So we work to kind of open the doors a little bit on that, to show the fact that that apparatus replacement budget wasn't sufficient, and council made a decision and they moved on it for us, and they threw in an appropriation for a new ladder truck because we defined factually what the need was, and it was definitely for a safety factor and a capacity for a capability factor for the fire department. So I think we brought to light the facts of what was necessary in the budget beyond what was actually demonstrated, and we resolved an issue which was important for both the safety of the firefighters and the community that we serve.
Helen, did you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Right. David, anything you'd like to say to wrap up?
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Seriously, I know I ramble on too much sometimes on things, and if there's any clarity that I need to provide on anything, call about 1 o'clock when I don't have the afternoon coffee on board, and maybe I'll be a little less hyperactive or whatever. But honestly, I'm passionate about trying to do right for the citizens in this community, and to try to listen to everybody's position on that, and quit being, man, I think we're just so one-sided in this community. And I think that the influx of the people and the demographics that we're seeing with this community deserves better than just to try to say staunchly, you know what I mean, we're a uber conservative community. And man, that just doesn't lend itself to actually creating a community that people want to live in. And I don't know how many more years the good Lord's got for me, but I tell you what, as long as I'm here, I'm going to try to do my best to make sure that the city moves in the right direction for me, my family, my kids, and my grandkids. So it's from a point of passion, and I greatly appreciate your time to allow me to express that.
Okay. We will be releasing the edition with our endorsements sometime in mid-March, probably the 10th or the 17th, around when ballots come out. So be sure to look for an independent around then, and we appreciate your time too.
All right. Have a blessed day.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.